When was the last time someone made you feel like the most interesting person in the room? Not the most attractive, not the most impressive, the most interesting. Think about that for a second, because most of us, if we're being honest, can't actually remember. We remember moments when someone complimented us or agreed with us or found us funny. But that specific feeling of being genuinely completely interesting to another person, that's rare. That's almost startling when it happens. Now, imagine a woman feeling that specifically because of something you said. Not because of how you look, not because of what you own, not because of how hard you tried. Because of three words, three specific combinations of words that do something to the way she experiences you, and more importantly, the way she experiences herself around you. That's what this video is about, and I want to be clear before we go any further. These aren't manipulation tactics, they're not scripts. They work precisely because they can't be faked, and I'm going to show you why. If you try to use them as lines, they'll fall flat. If you use them because you've actually become the kind of man who means them, they'll change every conversation you have. Let's get into it. The first combination is you just said something. Not, that's interesting. Not, good point. Not, I agree. Just, you just said something. Full stop. Here's what that phrase does in real time. David is 57. He's having a conversation with a woman in her early 30s at a mutual friend's dinner party. She's talking half to him, half to the table, about how she thinks people confuse being busy with feeling alive. It's an offhand observation. She almost throws it away. David puts his fork down, looks at her, says, "You just said something." The table keeps moving. She turns to him. "What do you mean?" That distinction you just made between busy and alive, most people haven't separated those two things in their own heads yet. You have. She didn't say much for the next 30 seconds. Not because she was uncomfortable, because something landed. Now, here's why this works the way it does. Younger women, and honestly, women of any age, are constantly in social situations where they're being reacted to but not actually heard. Someone laughs at what they say, or agrees, or redirects. What almost never happens is someone stopping the flow of conversation to say, "What you just said was worth stopping for." You just said, "Something does that." It treats a moment of her expression as genuinely significant. Significant enough to mark it, to name it, to slow everything down around it. The psychological effect is validation at a very specific level. Not "you're great," which is about her identity. Not "I agree," which is about the content. But what came out of you just now was real and worth recognizing. That's validation of her mind, her way of seeing. And that is the rarest form of being seen that most people ever experience. One more quick version of this. James is 61. A woman he's been seeing for 3 weeks says something in passing about why she stopped painting in her 20s. It's casual. She moves on. He waits a beat, then says quietly, "You just said something. Did you hear yourself?" She laughs a little, uncertain. "What?" "You said you stopped because you were afraid it would stop being yours if other people saw it. That's a real thing. Most people never name that." She went home and picked up a brush for the first time in 9 years. That is the power of this phrase used with sincerity. It doesn't just make her feel seen in conversation. It makes her feel seen by herself. The second combination is "tell me why." Not "why do you think that?" Not "that's interesting." Why? Just clean, direct, unhurried. Tell me why. Three words, but the way they land is completely different from any other version of the same question. Here's the difference. Why do you think that puts the emphasis on her reasoning? It's slightly analytical. It asks her to defend or explain. Tell me why puts the emphasis on her. It's not asking for justification. It's asking for access. There's no pressure in it. It's an invitation, not an interrogation. Marcus is 58. A younger woman he's been on a few dates with says she's been thinking about leaving her job. Not because she hates it, but because something about it doesn't feel like her anymore. Most men would immediately go into problem-solving mode. What are your options? Have you thought about what you'd do next? What's the financial picture? Marcus says, "Tell me why." She pauses. Because nobody asked that. Everyone she's talked to about this has asked what or how. He asked why. And here's the thing about why, especially when it's asked without urgency, without an agenda, without the conversation already heading somewhere, It makes people go deeper than they plan to. She finds herself saying things she hadn't quite put into words yet. And in the process of saying them, she understands herself better. That's the obsession trigger hiding inside this phrase. It's not that he's impressive, it's that she's more articulate, more clear, more herself in his presence than she is anywhere else. And she starts to associate that feeling with him. She doesn't just want to see him again, she wants to feel that way again. Robert is 54. A woman he's seeing says she prefers being alone to being at most social gatherings. A lot of men would either relate it to themselves or gently push back. You don't seem like an introvert. Robert says, tell me why. She thinks about it, really thinks. And she says, because most gatherings ask me to be a version of myself I don't actually like. He nods slowly. That's very clear self-knowledge. Two things just happened. She discovered something true about herself in real time, and he witnessed it without judgment. That combination, self-discovery in the presence of someone who holds it carefully, is one of the most bonding experiences a human being can have. And he created it with 3 words and a silence. The third combination is, I remember that. This one operates differently from the first two. The first two work in the moment. This one works across time, and it might be the most quietly powerful of the 3. Here's the scenario. Thomas is 60. He's been seeing a woman in her late 20s for about 2 months. Early on, she mentioned, just once in passing, that she used to be terrified of flying as a kid, but made herself get on a plane alone at 19 because she refused to let fear run her life. It was a small detail. She didn't think he was paying close attention. 6 weeks later, she mentions she has a work trip coming up. He says, is this the first long flight you've taken in a while? I remember you said flying used to scare you. She stops, stares at him for a second. You remembered that? Of course. 2 words, of course. As if there was never any question. She called her sister that night, not to talk about the trip, to talk about him. Here's the psychology operating underneath. I remember that. Memory, in the context of a relationship, is not just a cognitive function. It's a statement of value. What we remember reveals what we prioritized. When someone remembers a small thing you said, not a big dramatic moment, not something you repeated 10 times, but a passing detail you mentioned once, it tells you something undeniable. They were listening when it didn't count, when there was no reason to remember, when you weren't even trying to be memorable. That's the experience younger women are almost never having with men. The men around them are present for the headline moments. The older man who tracks the small things, not performatively, not to score points, but because he was actually there when she said it. That man creates a feeling of being known that goes very deep, very fast. Richard is 63. A woman he's dating mentioned 2 dates ago that she always orders the same thing at Thai restaurants because she had a bad experience trying something new once. Tiny throwaway detail. On their next date at dinner, she's looking at the menu. He says, no pressure, but they have the dish you always order if you want to stay safe tonight. She looks up, laughs. How do you even remember that? He shrugs. You told me. She ordered something new for the first time in years. And later she realized it was because she felt safe enough to. That's the full circle of what I remember that creates. Not just the warmth of being remembered, but a felt sense of security that actually changes her behavior. She expands in his presence because his presence says, I've been paying attention and nothing you've said has been lost on me. So let's look at what these 3 phrases actually have in common. You just said something, tell me why. I remember that. None of them are about the man. Not one of these phrases draws attention to him. His experience, his opinion, his story, his achievements, every single one of them points the light directly at her, at what she said, at what she thinks, at what she revealed. That's the pattern. That's what creates the obsession, not the word itself, but the consistent, unhurried experience of being the most interesting person in the room, of being someone whose words are worth stopping for, whose reasons are worth understanding, whose small details are worth carrying forward. Most men spend their lives trying to be interesting. The older man who's figured this out has stopped. He's become genuinely interested instead. And that shift from performing to receiving is the thing she can't stop thinking about because she's never felt it before. Not like this. And once she has, ordinary conversation feels thin in comparison. If one of these three landed for you, just drop the number in the comments. 1, 2, or 3. I want to know which one hit closest to something real in your own life. And if you want to understand what happens after she's interested, how to keep that pull alive without ever becoming predictable, the next video covers exactly that. It's the part most men never reach. Go watch it.